Welcome to the Modern Software Engineering channel. Today's one big question is, can we tackle security and compliance in our deployment pipelines? I'm joined by Dan here, and Dan's been a naughty boy. He's been making very long responses to one big question episodes. So today we're putting a timer on him.
It's true. It's true. Today there is a clock.
Today there's a clock.
Now, however, what Dave doesn't know is whether or not I will actually adhere to the clock in any way, or whether it's purely decorative.
I think Dave does know that, to be honest. And the answer is no, you won't. To
be fair, Dave also has the stop button, so he can just cut me off.
This episode is sponsored by Octopus Deploy. Octopus makes it easy to deploy software to Kubernetes, multi-cloud, on-premises infrastructure, and anywhere else really. They automate the release, deployment and operations of your software and AI workloads with a tool that can handle continuous delivery at scale. Octopus also have tools that can help you to achieve regulatory compliance, and that improves the security of your systems. So very relevant to today's question. So do check out their links in the description, and thank you to Octopus for their ongoing support of our work on the Modern Software Engineering channel.
I've got to say, I want to jump straight in here. I love this topic. This is, as someone who's been particularly consulting and advising as much as delivering software in what we would loosely call an agile way for north of 2 decades. This is one of the ones that comes up a lot. I think probably in order of frequency of this won't work here, it's trunk-based development, pair programming and compliance, right? They seem to be the big thing, right? We can't do trunk-based development. We have 80 live branches, right?
Yeah.
Pair programming won't work because it's twice as expensive.
Yeah.
Or I hate working with juniors because I'm brilliant or something. The compliance one is really close to my heart. I just want to start with I've worked with lots of compliance people and regulatory people. I just want to start, as I tend to, Dave, with definitions, is mostly when I talk to engineering folks about compliance and regulatory, they kind of do the sucking in through the teeth and the, adversarial, none shall pass with the clipboards. I got talking to some compliance people. I worked with, I think it's long enough now that I can name names, in Erlangen in Germany, working with Siemens Healthcare. And Siemens is vast, right? It's a huge, huge organization. Siemens Healthcare, this bit of it, they do MRI scanners, CT scanners, so the control systems for like proper safety critical systems. And they invited me in because they wanted to adopt, they wouldn't have called it that because it wasn't called this yet, but continuous delivery for MRI and CT systems, which many folks would say was impossible. So I went in there and went through what I now call my path of greatest resistance. It's a technique I use, where you go in and Dave invites me in, Dave's head of engineering, and he says, we want to do this thing. And I propose stuff like, continuous delivery. And Dave says, this is great, I love this, except so-and-so won't let us. Like so-and-so's like the release manager. Let's go meet the release manager. Go meet the release manager. Release manager is fine, loves the idea, but so-and-so won't let us, right? Well, who won't let us? So you basically, you navigate the organization through the people who are going to say no. And at Siemens Healthcare, the ultimate person who was going to say no was Dr. Vera. And Dr. Vera was head of regulatory for, these safety critical systems. And I get an audience with Dr. Vera and I go into her office. She's a very serious, austere looking woman. Who it turns out has a brilliant sense of humor, but I didn't know this at the time. And I said, so what do you do? She said, I'm head of regulatory. And I said, so what does that mean? She goes, my job is to make sure that nobody dies. Right. That's someone with a mission, right? It's not, we have to adhere to these regulations of law. Yeah. My job is to make sure nobody dies. So that was, I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Roll it on a few years. I'm in yet another large investment bank, and they are looking to basically get better at compliance, or the thing that we now call continuous compliance, as a nod to continuous delivery. So the idea was, can we make a lot of the compliance stuff that is always, backloaded and heavy process at the end, can we kind of make some of that go away or make some of that lighter? And we set up a workshop. It was like 2 full days of workshop with all the senior compliance folks and all the senior engineering folks in a room. We started the 2 days by printing out all the regulations, right? It turns out there's not that many when you just go and get at the bullet level. And we stuck all the pieces of paper up on this big wall. And the first morning we said, right, okay, we want everyone to read all of these bullets, right? And if there's anything on there that you think is stupid, just say so and we'll get rid of it. And they went, okay. And meanwhile, the head of compliance person introduces themselves. We say, so, tell us about compliance. What's it for? And he said, and again, Dave, you've probably said these same words. He said, we have compliance so it's safe to be a bank, right? If I know that it's safe to be a bank, you can go as fast as you like. Yeah. Like, really? And then where it went from there is like, well, okay, so how come there's so much like paperwork? How come there's so much? And they said, that we know we could automate a load of this, but we don't have any engineers, right? We're compliance. And the engineers went, we've got engineers. Yeah. So we went back to this wall that had all the stuff on it. And it turned out of all the things, it was things like you should write code because you have a requirement, right? You should know why you're writing the code. The requirement should have an owner. It came from somewhere. Right, yeah. You should know when you're done. Like, none of this is rocket science, and everyone's going, actually, yeah, that seems pretty sensible. So the compliance piece was like, is it safe to be a bank? Is anyone going to die? Right, and I think those are reasonable requests to make.
I've often had the same kind of conversation. So I've done a lot of working in regulated industries, including, interestingly enough, at Siemens Healthcare several times, but other healthcare providers too. And as you say, there's this great tension very often between software development groups and compliance because they seem adversarial from the outside very often. But actually, it is exactly that. If you stop and think what compliance is for, we're trying to produce software that could do great damage. In these safety critical systems, they could kill people. It could lose billions of pounds worth of other people's assets or whatever it is. That's why they're regulated. It's to stop us doing dangerous, stupid things. And that seems reasonable. Usually it seems to me that compliance is focused on two groups of things. One is, let's adopt some behaviors to avoid the things that we know are stupid. So we know it's stupid to just wander in and be randomly building stuff without an idea of what it is that we want to achieve and those sorts of things. And let's organize in ways that will, on the whole, give us the best chance of doing sensible things. So that's one set of things that I think that compliance is often useful for, putting in some of those guardrails in place. And the other thing is, when something goes wrong, because things will go wrong, how we will be able to recognize that something went wrong and how we will be able to stop that same kind of thing going wrong again in future. And that's about what audit is for, and traceability and those sorts of aspects of compliance are really about. It's to give us that insight. And all of those things seem to me very strongly aligned with what I would think of as good software engineering. It's what doing a good job looks like. We want all of those things. So the trick is to, how do we do that without heavyweight bureaucracy and paperwork? And as you've already alluded, that's largely about automating these things. And you can. So at Siemens and in other places, we did some of that stuff. We did the continuous compliance thing. And I am now so convinced that not only is the answer to the original question, is it possible? I would actually go further. I would say, I don't believe that you can actually be regulatory compliant properly in the absence of continuous delivery, because I don't think you can collect enough data and enforce the rules strongly enough to be able to be compliant strictly. I've never seen an organization that was as compliant as a continuous delivery organization in my career.
I think it's a fair observation. It's worth teasing apart, I think, with any regulation, you have like the motivation. So Sarbanes-Oxley, we don't want one rogue person being able to put code into production, right? It seems like a reasonable thing to do. Yeah. And so you have the two pairs of eyes rules and things like that, or MiFID, you need to know which is your money and which is someone else's money, and so you're only trading your money. Those kind of things. The motivation generally is something bad happened and we don't want the bad thing to happen again. Then the regulation is some, as you say, some guardrail, some constraint. But then you have the implementation of that regulation. And that, I think, is where we get into the adversarial stuff and the process theatre and the governance theatre. The classic example to make, and someone pointed this out to me, it's like one of these hiding in plain sight things, right? But so very often, the implementation of Sarbanes-Oxley for folks who aren't in finance was in the wake of the 2007 crash was to say, basically, we can't, any software change in a banking system, someone else has to look at it.
Yeah.
Dave can't go and just do stuff. Daniel has to at least, get some pair of eyes on it. And they called it the 2 pairs of eyes principle. Now, what that generally transpired to was that a dev person would write the code and an ops person would then release the code. So that they had the release button. At which point it all becomes a bit theater, because the ops person has a binary, right? So unless the ops person can decompile and understand bytecode, or a C++, whatever, compiled binary, an ELF executable, then they have zero oversight and zero insight into what just happened there. By far the best way of doing 2 pairs of eyes is pairing. And then the second by a long way is code reviews, which we've discussed before. But the idea that the generally accepted way of doing X is to do X badly because everyone else is.
Yes.
And then we end up with the particularly the document theater. We have to have this document. And for me, one of the earliest places, and I have a feeling, Dave, we might have been on the same project. Certainly it was around the same time, where there was a release document. The release document was a Word doc. And part of the release process was that the Word doc had to have, you had to have the Word doc up to date. And it was like changes since the last release and a big template. Mm-hmm. And someone observed that a Word document is a zip file containing XML files.
Yeah.
And we went, okay, well, we can explode that. We can template up the bits that matter. And then we would generate, and then if people put, whenever they did a Git commit, if people put the issue number, the Jira ticket, whatever, as part of the commit, and if we use words like close, fixes, the kind of things that GitHub will recognize, then we could do a round trip thing where I could go into Jira, I could look at all tickets, all work items that are closed since the last release, right? Pull out all and I can basically generate your release doc. And so what we'd do is we'd have the release doc was a build artifact.
Yes.
So every viable build, part of the things that came out with the jar files or whatever was the Word doc that said this is everything that's in this release.
Yeah, and it can be much more detailed.
And it was exactly as you say, Dave. It was more likely to be current because of continuous delivery than anyone trying to keep it up to date.
Yeah. And if your deployment pipeline is the one route to production, it can be completely authoritative about that. If you link your pipeline information systems with your development management systems like Jira or whatever, then you can track whose idea it was, who came up with the idea, who worked on it, all of the commits that added up to this change, what the feature was that you were working on. All of those things, you can kind of glue all of those things together and you can build a complete auditable picture.
Well, and from the commits, you can say, this is the test code for this feature. This is the production code for this feature.
These were all the tests that ran and passed.
Yeah.
And so on. And these are the performance scores and whatever else. Yeah.
So roll this forward, and it turns into, at one large German bank, we built a platform where the guy who led this, I won't name him because I don't want to embarrass him. He's brilliant, but he's very shy, very modest. And his mantra was idea to production safely in a day.
Yes.
Right. So I want to take a thing, I want it to be live, and safely was the key, was all of the regulatory bits. And so we built this platform. And he ended up exceeding his goal. You could now go from idea to production safely in half a day. You put it in the morning, it would be live by lunchtime.
Yeah.
As part of that was nothing to do with the platform. Part of that was lots and lots and lots of conversations at higher and higher levels, where they agreed a lightweight path to live for code that had certain characteristics. Small changes, good test coverage, clear definition, basically this criteria. And if you had this criteria, you were allowed to use the continuous compliance platform. And the rule was no one has to use it. Yeah. Right? If you do use it, basically all of your homework is done. If you don't, that's fine, but you've got to do all the admin. And suddenly now he was managing a huge queue of people that were clamoring to get onto this platform. Yeah, yeah. And there was one brilliant exchange that I was there for that just made me chuckle. This very serious senior German engineer who was running this huge program, he said, I'm running this large program of work and I can't use your platform. He said, that's right, yeah. He said, but I can game this. He says, well, how are you going to game it? He goes, I can slice my project into lots of small projects and each of those can use your platform. Yeah. And he's like, you got me.
Yeah.
It was gorgeous.
As long as you can deploy them independently.
So it's driving exactly the behaviors that you wanted.
Yeah. So we did, at LMAX, we did pretty much all of the same things. So we were our deployment pipeline, if you measured everything, took just under an hour to do everything in performance testing, scalability testing, the lot, everything. And that include regulatory compliance. So we could generate a release note and all of the documentation that was required.
Well, you're an exchange, right? You're a very regulated product.
Yeah, we were a heavily regulated financial exchange. So we could do all of that in an hour. So theoretically, depending on the nature of the change, we could do from idea to production in probably a couple of hours, if it took you an hour to think about the problem and to solve it. But all of the compliance stuff was wholly automated, and it was more difficult for us to release something that wasn't regulatory compliant than for us to release something that was, because all of the compliance was enforced by our pipeline and our systems. That's just how we worked all of the time.
I'm going to make an observation. We've been exclusively talking about regulatory and compliance. We haven't touched on security. I'm going to...
We're nearly 2 minutes over time.
Yes, I'm going to suggest that I think it's significant enough a topic to be a separate one big question.
I think it is, but we should probably give a very fast answer to... So can we build security into our deployment pipelines? And the answer, I would say the answer once again is yes.
So I look at it slightly differently. I don't talk about security. Security is the consequence. I talk about securability. So if you can build a securable system, a system about which you can reason about its security, the rest of it is gravy, right? So, small components, small attack surface areas, high definition, clear APIs, high power to weight. There's a wonderful book that I had the privilege of writing the foreword for called Secure by Design by three Dans. Dunberg Johnson and two other Dans, and I wrote the foreword on the basis there weren't nearly enough Dans involved yet.
Yeah,
and it's gorgeous. It takes domain-driven design, and it says how can you use domain-driven design to build systems that are inherently secure. And when you start looking at your architecture as a securable thing, your domain model as a securable thing, and then you look at your supply chain of dependencies as being a securable thing. So you got your chain guards, and there are other folks out there doing this, but Chain Guard do it brilliantly. And then you have something like Octopus, where you've got your you've got your nice build technology, if you like, that once it goes in there, I know exactly what's going to happen. I know exactly how the sausage gets made.
Yeah.
Then you can have much more confident discussions about the security of that kind of system.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that you didn't mention that I would also mention is testing for all of those things.
Absolutely, yeah.
So multi-layered stacked testing as part of evaluating your, the security behaviors that you are building into your system, evaluating the threat surface area and all of those kinds of things as well. So absolutely you can do that.
I would say yes and.
Yes.
I would say yes and human beings. I was working at one trading firm, and they, very, very deliberately, they invited some white hat folks in to basically try and punch into their systems because they wanted someone to punch into their systems. And they had a large, very well-known consulting firm that came in and literally with a clipboard and did a review and a report, and they said everything looked okay and tickety-boo and stuff. And then the following day, a guy came in. He was kind of sitting in reception, had a baseball cap on. I remember I was there this day in the office. He's sitting with a baseball cap on, and he's just tapping around a laptop or something. And the receptionist is like, "Who are you here to see?" He goes, "Oh, I'm here to see so and so, like the CIO." "Oh, I'm really sorry. Because we're having the lift service. We thought you were the lift guy."
Yeah.
And he goes, no, he goes, "I get that a lot, don't worry." And then anyway, so then by the time the CIO comes out, he goes, "I just need to show you something." And while he's been sitting in reception, he's on the Wi-Fi, he's got through the firewall, he's got through the DMZ, he's onto production servers. Yeah. And he's done this in the 15 minutes he's been sitting in reception.
Yeah.
And he's like, "We need to talk about your hard shell not being that hard." And you absolutely need human beings.
Yeah.
In the security story as well.
Absolutely, yeah. The other thing that we used to do was so as an exchange, a regulated exchange, one of our regulatory requirements was that we had to do a penetration test every 6 months. So right. we had an external third party that would come in and do attempt penetration tests on our system, and we'd allocate a pair of developers to work with them and support them and give them anything that we need. But also part of what they were doing was looking at what they were doing so they could learn what they were doing, and then we'd automate that. We'd write tests to do what they'd been doing, and we'd run those as part of our deployment pipeline. They'd never find the same mistake twice.
But this again goes absolutely back to what the regulation says and how you implement it.
Yes.
You know, yes, you have to have pen testing done, and if you get, you know, J-friendly pen tester who just gives you the clean sheet, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Box check. No, you're Dave Farley, so you're going to say, right, I want to find the meanest, nastiest person I can, and I want to let them go nuts on my network because I want to learn.
Yes.
I want to learn what's weak here because I want to run a good ship.
Yeah, I want to stop people being hurt by losing all their money. Yeah. We have now overrun by 6 minutes and 46 seconds, so now's probably time to stop. Thanks everybody for watching, thanks to our Patreons for supporting us, and thanks for Octopus once again for sponsoring this episode. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks Dave.